Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 371 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is service. Our quote of the day comes to us from Muhammad Ali. Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. As we're approaching the final month of 2022, if you are looking to finish off your year strong as you head into 2023, we would love it if you checked out our new Clear Planner. Think calendar, journal, planner, and goal tracker all in one. You can take a look by heading on over to theclearplanner.com. I first learned about today's guest from a good friend of mine named Jimmy, and I appreciate the introduction. Jay Ferruggia is full of energy, insight, and I had a blast speaking with him. I know you will enjoy today's episode. Jay, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. Pleasure.
Appreciate it. First question we ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Always, every day.
So when we spoke offline, we have some friends in common. It's always fun to get a chance to connect before we go live. But the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you yourself have a no-quit story you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners.
Yeah, it's always a toss-up between two that I like to share. So one, the first one, I'm going to cheat a little and give you two quick ones. So the first one was I started my business when I was 19. I was making six figures by the time I was 20. And on my 21st birthday, I was in bed by 9, getting up, grinding, hustling. But all during that time, I had a lot of bad habits. I was spending money like MC Hammer. And so I get to 31, and bro, I had been making six figures since I was 20. And I blew it all with just a lot of bad habits, gambling, drinking, partying, and also trying to buy love that I didn't have as a kid. That's a whole nother deep story. But because my friends at that time were making, 30, 50 grand, I'm like, yo, let's go into the city. Let's go out. I'll get bottle service. I'll get VIP. Let's go to Vegas. I'll get us the Hard Rock suite. So I blew through all my money, and I had to call my mom at 31 years old, tears in my eyes, and Mom, can I move back into your spare bedroom for like 6 months just to get back on my feet? And so, I'm eating bagels and potatoes and looking for quarters and, the couch in the cushion, between the cushions and whatnot. And so that was rough. That was a rough time for sure. But just grinded, man. I didn't go out, 6 months. I didn't go out once. I just, put in the work and rebuilt the business to bigger than ever before. And so that would probably be my biggest one is, and it was like, I didn't tell anyone at the time, right? Because I had my own column in Men's Fitness. Like I'm everywhere. I was working on this book that I was publishing with Penguin, and I was, really well known at the time. I had 1 million visitors coming to my blog, and it was funny. Like a good friend of mine who was also in the industry was joking around, like a world-renowned trainer moves in with his mom, and like we had a laugh about it. But man, that was tough. But so I would say that would probably be my number one.
I appreciate the backstory, and I think the objective for me is. And I think you'll probably agree with this, but in social media today, everybody always posts their highlight reels, the best. And I think for me, and why I love that question, is everybody that's successful, and I either know myself, have been introduced to somebody else, they all have those, and I say those in plural, multiple no-quit stories. And it's what you do with those setbacks and challenges and obstacles. I think that you become a better version of yourself. So wanted to give you an opportunity, if you wouldn't mind, just quickly tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so like I said, I started when I was 19 because I just grew up, stereotypical. First I was a fat kid, then skinny, weak, insecure, shy, socially awkward, introverted, didn't have a ton of friends, was picked last for sports, not the greatest athlete by any stretch. But I would wake up every morning and watch wrestling on I don't know if it was the same channel, but like on
9.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
So not to interrupt real quick, but don't forget where you're going with that. But I got to ask you, who's your all-time favorite one or two wrestlers?
I would say HBK in terms of in the ring performers. It's cool now because it's like a fantasy. Like I'm friends with half the active roster. I work with a lot of those guys. I'm backstage. Like I've been at the Hall of Fame. It's great. Like I've met everybody. What about you? Who are your favorites?
My two. I would say three, but all when I was young, it was Hulk Hogan. I mean, you could not like the Hulk. But then as I got older, I just loved The Rock, what he did in the ring, and I'm a big John Cena fan because I think he's the type of guy that just made something happen really from nothing, being a former D3 college athlete to multimillionaire.
Of course, Stone Cold. I mean, Stone Cold's run was the greatest ever.
My college roommate, whenever he drank, he would turn into Stone. He would do two things. He would one recite every single line from Forrest Gump, which was hilarious at like 2 a.m. But then he would do these impersonations of Stone Cold literally all the time. So I got way too much of Stone Cold in college.
Yeah, it's like sometimes when I scroll through my phone when I started A's and I see that I have Stone Cold's number in my phone as a huge wrestling fan as a kid, it's like that's crazy.
That's awesome. I'm going to steal your phone when we're done with this. So I cut you off. So go back to you. So you were sharing.
I'd wake up Saturday mornings, watch wrestling, and I'd see these larger than life kind of like cartoon figures, and here I am, this little skinny fat dude, and I was like, man, I'd love to look like that one day. I'd love to have that kind of confidence. And so in 1988, my cousin Christine actually started dating a professional wrestler. He wasn't with WWF, but he was with like some smaller federation. But still, here's a dude, I'm 12, 13 years old, little skinny fat kid. And here's a dude who's 6'4", 250, and I get to see him all the time. So he kind of got me into the gym and whatnot. And so anyway, long story short, I ended up making it a career. I went into college with a communications major, but then switched to exercise science and started interning in the weight room. Spent every dime I ever made on, just self-educating myself, back before the internet, going to events, going to workshops, seminars, internships. And like I said, I started training people at 19, saved up enough money to start one of the original kind of underground warehouse style gyms, like what's so popular today, where we had all the stuff that you didn't see back. You see it now everywhere, right? But tires, sledgehammer, sandbags, kegs, all that. We had all that. And went on to do that for the next 15 years, had my own column in Men's Fitness. Like I said, wrote the book, work with the Dodgers. You can see there, work with a bunch of teams like that. So that's kind of long story short.
And if you wouldn't mind also, just please touch on your podcast too. So for any of our listeners that are looking to get another show other than this one, would love to ask you about that as well.
Yeah, I've started the podcast. I believe it was 8 years ago, or it might be 9 coming up in April. Maybe 9 coming up in April. It was just kind of, because like I said, I was always kind of insecure and shy and socially awkward. When I moved from Jersey and New York, 3,000 miles away to Cali, where I lived for almost 11 years, a lot of that was just to reinvent myself and, overcome some of those false narratives and some of those self-limiting beliefs I had and really work on my personal development. And so I became like known as like the super connector and the mayor in LA. Like I knew everybody, and I got there only knowing 3 people. So I just wanted to take that and, have more conversations, push myself out of my comfort zone. Because for years, when I was super successful, I still was comfortable in my gym with I could have 20 college athletes around in my 1,000 square foot space, but you get me out in the world, I was still like, I'm not taking pictures, I'm not doing videos, I'm not doing this. I didn't like the sound of my voice, I didn't like how I looked, so it was just a way to push myself. Actually, it's selfish. And then through doing it, I got to know so many great people. We're almost 500 episodes in. There was a stretch for 5 years where we did them all live in studio. So I got to meet everybody. Like some of my closest friends I met. As doing it's a great way to meet people, especially when you're in person with them.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I think that's been the biggest takeaway from using your word from the selfish side is that's obviously not why I did my podcast or you did yours. But when you really get an opportunity to connect with someone like that, and a lot of them are in person, a lot of them are over Zoom, you get a chance to really have those conversations. And I think that has been for me such an amazing perspective, and I've been super fortunate to have met and have had some really cool people that I look up to on my show. So I'm gonna ask you this, and I wanted to get your answer, and I'm actually curious. Do you have a favorite guest all time that's been on your show?
It's so hard because so many people were or are my close friends now, so it's hard to say. I just had Steve Sims on for the second time the other day. Steve, he wrote the book Blue Fishing. Okay. Steve's great, man.
He's been on my show once, and a crazy story. There's a guy that goes to my gym that has the license plate Bluefish, for the state of New York, and literally like 4 days after I recorded with Steve, I took a picture and I sent it to him, and he was like, "I know that guy," and I was like, "Wait, what?" And
Wow.
so he actually knew who that was.
Steve's definitely up there. I mean, so so many of the WWE guys have been fun just because I'm a huge, lifelong fan. You know who Cesaro is?
Yep.
He goes by his real name now in AEW. He was great, man. I just love him personally. So and what I'll do to really make sure I'm establishing a relationship is I schedule the podcast when I'm doing them live. That everything I need to do for the day is done. So if someone like when Sheamus came over, you know Sheamus, right? So Sheamus came, he got to the house to do the podcast at 12. We go into the studio. We hang out for like 2-3 hours. And we finally go into the studio, we record. And then at midnight, we're across the street drinking at an Irish bar. And I don't really drink that. I hadn't had a beer in 7 years, but he's, ordering beers. And so we hung out for 12 hours straight. And to this day, he's a close friend because of that. But yeah, I mean, there's so many great ones. It's hard to say,
I had Ryback on who was
Oh,
pretty
okay.
cool as far as just, and obviously he's a fitness freak. You mentioned
Yeah.
the personal development world, and wanted to ask you if you have a morning routine that you swear by.
I've gone through every iteration of it, right? Like I've tried to copy every famous and wealthy person's morning routine, and now it's really just like the most important things for me are just getting up. Because I'm a huge music guy, right? Like obsessed with music. So hip hop's been the soundtrack to my life since 1984, and so basically, I just get up, I play my morning pump up music, and it's got the Rocky theme song on there, it's got the Superman theme song on there, and then it's just got a lot of like pump up hip hop stuff. Bad.
Is it your own that you created?
I made it. Yeah, I created it. So I play that, and it's basically just reprogramming my mind every day just to believe in myself, to be this badass. That was one of the things I loved about hip hop growing up was like the braggadocio of DMC saying I'm the king and LL saying I'm bad. And I was like, all right, I can do this. I can, and so I still do it to this day. So I do that. I write in a journal, but it's not like this long thing like it used to be. It's just like a few names of people that I'm grateful for, a few things. And then that's it. I really get to work on my most important task. And I get up before the sun, but I always make sure I get morning sunlight just for circadian rhythms and sleep and all that. So that's really it, dude. It's just making sure I have that music playing. I'm drinking my coffee, get to work on the most important task, write the journal, and get out in the sun. And then when I'm out walking, I'll listen to something other than music. I'll listen to like some kind of book on tape or podcast, book on tape, like some kind of audio on, on a phone. Showing my age there. And that's it, really. I used to go through the whole thing where I was like meditating in the morning and journaling and reading this and doing that and getting red light. And I was like, when I wake up, I'm fired up. I just want to get to work. Later in the day, I could do all the other stuff, meditate, breath work, red light.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because personally I've found that over the last 10 years, my morning routines have changed. And I think going back to what you said about what the gurus say and all these other people, I think for me, and what I try to teach and coach with my clients is first and foremost, find out what works for you. But then secondly, reverse engineer what time you're getting up so you can maximize that time, not to the point where you have to do 48 things, but figure out what is that sweet spot. And I loved how you touched on you can do some of those other things later on. I used to struggle where if I didn't go through those checklists of those 3, 4, 5, 6 things in the morning, it would mess with my head in a 10 o'clock meeting or 11 o'clock meeting. Instead of being present, or in a podcast interview, I'm thinking about, I didn't do my meditation, I didn't do my journaling. Yeah. And what I realized is, going back to the concept of consistency versus perfection, it's not about doing every single thing perfect every single day. It's about maximizing what works best for you. So I appreciate you touching on that.
I mean, I think that's a great point that you brought up there too, because I've dealt with that. I know a lot of people like us or high performers deal with that, where you have that anxiety if you don't do the things, right? So I think it's individual. What's really important to you? It's like the cliche, like if the plane's going down, you put your mask on first. Like I believe you got to take care of yourself. Like if I don't train, if I don't get morning sun, if I don't read 10 pages a day, and I'm going to go, let's say you and I are going to meet for dinner. I won't be great at dinner. Like I'll be down on myself. But if I do those things, then I can be there for you and be fully present. We could have a great time. So I think it is important, and it's different for everybody, right? And like what time of the day. Again, at the end of the day, that's what's important. If I could check those boxes at the end of the day, not necessarily that at a certain time, then I feel good about myself, and then I'm good to go.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that is really important in the sense of, it's not about doing those 12 things just to do them. It's about being present, about being there, but also realizing that for you and for me, we're very similar in many ways. If we were going out to dinner and I didn't do 3 or 4 of those things, it's going to be eating and you're going to be like, what's
Exactly.
wrong, dude? Everything good? I'm like, yeah, no, I'm good. And
Yeah.
then probably like
Yeah.
20 minutes into, I'll be like, all right, I'm not good because I didn't do these two or
Yeah.
3 things. You touched
Right.
on audiobooks. Wanted to ask if there's anything that you're reading currently or you've read recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Let's see. For some reason, I always draw a blank on this because I'm always reading multiple things at once. I was just rereading Story Brand, which is a great business book. I'm listening to Relentless again by Tim Grover.
Great book.
I was rereading Alex Hormozzi's book.
Have you read Winning?
No, I haven't yet. I haven't gotten the new one. How is it?
So I love Tim. I'm a diehard Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls fan. I had the
Yeah.
chance to meet Tim a couple of years back. Really enjoyed that time. I really, really like Relentless. I really think that Winning just took it to a different level. Not better
Okay.
per se, but just a different level of, and some of the sayings he has in that book and what he wrote. Just winning doesn't care about your opinions and like certain things, or you have to be stronger than your feelings, and it's just like things like that where I really
Okay.
thought it. So if you're reading and obviously rereading, as you said, Relentless, I think you would enjoy
Yeah.
Winning just because I think it's very similar. It's obviously not a sequel or anything, but I think it almost follows kind of where he started off with.
Okay, good. Because my fear was, sometimes books like that, the follow up is like, it's kind of redundant, kind of the same thing. Like Essentialism is one of my favorite books. Then the book he came out after that, I was like,
Yeah, I think for me, that's also where I struggle when you get a book from somebody and you're like, okay, this is the first one, it was awesome, and you read the second one and you're just like, all right, like it was basically the same thing. I won't say there's one specific author that I do like, but like his last 4 books have literally been the same, and I'm just like, all right, I'm not gonna buy him anymore.
yeah. And I'm funny with that because sometimes I like that. Like I just like the message to get beat into my head a million times over. It just kind of, I guess it depends.
No, and I'm glad you said it because that's the same way for me. And I was going to ask you if you ever reread books, which obviously you shared. That's something that I never did initially and early on. It was almost like the idea that I read this and I got it. But so many people and so many guests have touched on over the last 2 or 3 years rereading this book or rereading that book. And some guests actually will reread the same book like around the same time every year. I had a guest early on that rereads Think and Grow Rich every birthday, every year. And I was like, that's
Yeah.
kind of cool. But he was very specific to say that every single time he's reread it, and it's maybe 6 or 7 times now, he said, I always get 4 or 5 or 6 different things that I didn't get the last time. And I think for those really good books, that's where I think you can really take some of those awesome tidbits where maybe 3 months or 6 months or a year ago you read it
Yeah.
and you just glossed over it, but now at this point in your life you read that and you're like, wow, that's like amazing. And reality is you read the
Totally.
same thing 6 months ago, it just didn't hit you at the time.
Yeah. If I could go back, I would read far fewer books, just read the great ones multiple times. Like I'm even trying now to get rid of a bunch of books on my bookshelf.
So I got to ask you that because I struggle with that personally because I always read and I read a ton of books every year, and I've been struggling with the implementation piece. And now what I do is when I finish a book, I'll actually sit down and take maybe the best 5, 10, 12. I underline, I fold pages
Mm.
down, but
Yeah, me
I'll
too.
take those 10, 12 things now and put it actually in my journal or notebook. But I struggle with that. So wanted to just pick your brain on it. So you would really, if you could go back and read less uh, volume, less numbers, but more of
Yeah.
I guess, the great books.
Yeah, for sure. Just, ones that I found super powerful, I would just read them. I think if you mastered like your 10 favorite books so much that you could teach them, I mean, how far ahead of everybody on the planet would you be? Because I love, like, I love reading more books, but then I found myself like, what am I doing? Am I just racing through to say, oh, I read 140 books this year? I was like, can I really comprehend and remember all that kind of stuff? So I was trying to just slow down and then do what you did there. Like I'll go through, I'll take all the best notes, put it in a little file, and then I try to teach it as soon as possible after to kind of, help it sink in a little bit more, retain it a little more. So maybe talk about it on a podcast, share it with friends, whatever.
I'm glad that you shared that last piece, because I try to do that with my coaching. So whether I'm working with college teams or companies or individuals, I try to incorporate it into some of the stuff that I do, and not from a, trying to get this across as my information and my tools, but more along the lines of, to your point, is when you talk about it and teach it, I think you ingrain it in kind of who you are, as opposed to, again, back to what I said before, is I just struggled with, check mark, okay, I read all these books, and then it was like, well, what'd you get from them? Be like, well, it doesn't matter what I got from them. I'm like, look at all the books I've read. And
Yeah,
now, like you said, I gift a ton of books, and I've started to gift books that really have impacted me. But the interesting perspective is you and I could come up with a list right now of your top 10 and my top 10. And I would say with probably 80% certainty, there are going to be 2 or 3 overlaps, but I guarantee, those other 4, 5, 6 would be so different, which for me is such a challenge, because I'll read a book and I'll be like, Jay, this is the best book I've ever read. And you'll be like, yeah, it was okay. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then vice versa, you'll send me a book and be like, Chris, this is the best book I've ever read. Like, have you read it? And I was like, yeah, I stopped after 2 chapters. I didn't like it.
Yeah, totally.
So I know you know this quote by Jim Rohn: you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If I could grant you dinner with any 5 people, dead or alive, that you could level up with, who would you pick?
Wow. I'm going to put Dr. King, Bruce Lee, Bob Marley. I might put Pac in there. I mean, Pac's not even in my top 10 rappers, but I want to sit down. I mean, I love him, but he's not top 10. But I'd rather sit down with him more so than like M or Black Thought or Nas, maybe Chuck D. That's my 4. Who else would I put in there? I'll throw Kobe in there.
Bruce Lee, Kobe, and Dr. King are mine. So have to ask you, just because you set it up so nicely, but who are your top 10 rappers?
All right. So now, are we talking lyrically or just overall? See what I'm saying? Because for me, there's a difference, but we could be here for 4 hours.
Go with top 5 for both then.
All right. So top 5 lyrically, Black Thought has taken over as number 1 for me. So Black Thought, M, Nas, and then it could really change on the day. I got to put Rakim in there. And then, I mean, like I said, it could change on the day. I mean, I could throw Big Daddy Kane in there. I could throw Tretch in there, super underrated. I'll throw Kane in there for today. And then overall, like just favorites, it's still Black Thought, it's still M, it's still Nas. But then I might put Jay in there. And I mean, if I'm cheating with a group, I put Tribe Called Quest in there, Public Enemy. What about you?
It's similar to you. I don't have a list like you do, top 5, because mine changes in regard to kind of what I'm feeling, what I'm going through. Yeah. Where literally, like for a month or 2, it might be, like I used to still love Run DMC, but now I'm kind of, not say out of them, but I'm overplayed for a while. I went down a Jay-Z for like a couple months ago, but M just got inducted into the Hall of Fame, so I've been rewatching a bunch of his stuff, and his movie 8 Mile is one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, I mean, some of his freestyles and like some of those ciphers he's in, like lyrically, man, he's so nasty.
But the interesting thing about him though is a lot that was in that movie was depicted where he would literally, study the dictionary, and he would just grab a pen and paper and just write stuff down. And saying that now, it's so anti the way in which a lot of people do it, but that's why I think he was able to rhyme, and he was able to use a lot of that. And he was on 60 Minutes probably like maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and I forget who the interviewer was, but it was just a fascinating interview because he broke down kind of a little bit about what he did, and I forget again who the interviewer was, but he said, wait a minute, you actually studied the dictionary? And he said, yeah, I went through and studied words and things.
That. Yeah.
And it just hit me like, rappers don't do most human beings don't do that, but
right.
There's a reason he's considered one of the best.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to this part. We have what we call our hot seat questions, and the only request we have of you is that you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Oh, wow. All right.
Last meal, you can pick absolutely anything. What do you pick?
Pizza.
From New York pizza or any pizza?
Yeah, no, some really good New York pizza. I mean, if I could have 2 things with it, I'd have a really good burger and good pizza.
Favorite smell?
Favorite smell? Vanilla? I don't know.
Favorite sport?
It used to be football, now it's baseball.
Do you have an all-time
Yankees.
favorite team?
Yankees.
Yankees. Favorite movie?
Let's go Braveheart.
That's funny. Sean Casey was on and also said Braveheart. Do you have an all-time favorite book?
The Tao Te Ching.
What's your favorite app you use on your phone?
It's just would my music, Apple Music count?
It counts. What's
That's
the
playing 24/7.
what's the background picture on your phone?
That is my best friend. Can you see him? We
Yes.
we lost him
Oh,
January 16th.
sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
Do you have an all-time favorite quote?
Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth, Muhammad Ali.
That's a great quote. And what is that one song, no matter whenever you hear it, morning, evening, or afternoon, you just automatically turn it up and rock out to it?
Out of my head, scenario.
Scenario. All right, that is awesome.
If I'm at a party and scenario comes on, forget it. I'll lose my mind. I'm jumping through the roof. I'm East Coast stomping.
All right, so for listeners, anybody who wants to connect with Jay, send him something scenario related, so you guys can
Yeah.
become really good friends. During these challenging times, I think, as I said before, a lot of people are just posting their highlight reels, and I was curious if maybe you could recommend one or two people on social media to our listeners that really put out uplifting content that maybe they don't know about that you could introduce them to.
That's the hardest question I've been asked. I don't know. I try not to get too sucked in. I try to spend as little time on there as possible. I only go on Instagram, and I kind of just try to follow my friends. I mean, Bedros, you know Bedros?
Yep.
Bedros Koulian. He's one of my best friends. So I'd say Bedros. Who else is putting out uplifting stuff? I don't even know off the top of my head. My friend Craig Ballantyne puts out good stuff on just, being more productive and being more focused.
Puts out some great stuff, and Bedros, one of my all-time favorite books, Man Up.
Just such a great human being. Like he's literally one of my closest friends. We spent so much time together. Awesome dude.
If you're looking to just that kick in the pants in a good way, I thought Man Up was a fantastic book.
Great.
One of the things that we focus on here at No Quit Living, and something that really means a lot to us, is the word accountability. And I was just curious if you could briefly share what accountability means to you.
I think it's really hard to achieve any goal without accountability. You have to, whether you join some kind of mentorship, mastermind group, coaching program, have a one-on-one coach, or just someone that you really respect and look up to, and you really don't want to disappoint. Because if it's someone kind of like, whatever, it's my buddy and he's always drinking on the weekends, and you're not going to care if you disappoint him. It's got to be someone that you really admire and like, I don't want to let this person down. Public accountability is great too. Putting it out there on your social media or whatever, that puts the pressure on you. But I just think it's essential for achieving goals. It's really hard when you try to do that lone wolf thing. Like you just don't get anywhere. You need accountability in some form, if not multiple forms.
I'm glad you just touched on that, because I think some of the most successful people that I look up to, all walks of life, whether they use the term accountability partners, mentor, coach, I think those people, again, that I mentioned that I've looked up to, they really have so many people that hold them accountable in different areas, but they're open enough to say, yeah, it was when I really started going down this road and I hired a coach or a mentor, I got into this program or this mastermind. And I think that's the biggest disconnect with a lot of social media, is people put it out there as it's their stuff and I did this all. And yes, maybe you created that company or that brand, but it's because of those people along the way, those coaches, those mentors, maybe those programs you buy, that I think some of the most successful people have invested so much of their own time, money, and effort into those programs and people.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as men, right, like we have this kind of, I don't know, badge of honor or whatever, where you're like, I can do it all on my own, or I don't need advice, or I don't need help, or sometimes it's hard. And I've dealt with that where, I have access to a lot of the greatest, smartest people, and sometimes I'll catch myself and be like, dude, you can make a call and figure this out in 10 minutes versus battling 10 weeks to figure it out on your own.
I think that is so on point. And as you were saying that, I was smirking because I've definitely gone through those times in my life where it's like, all right, I'll figure it out on my own. But to your point, I do, and we all have access to nowadays with social media, so many amazing people out there, great content, where it's like, yes, you could probably figure it out on your own, but why spend the next 10, 20 weeks banging your head against the wall when you can reach out? So for our listeners, reach out to somebody. There's somebody in your space or world right now today that maybe could help you shorten that runway.
I think that you do get so much more though if you have skin in the game and you invest in yourself. Like for example, I have it like Bedros is one of my best friends, but there are times when I'll be like, you know what? I could ask B this, but I know if I pay somebody else a lot of money that just coaches me through it, I'll actually end up doing it more. And I'm not the kind of person that's going to be lazy or slacker or, even, I don't want to take advantage of my friends, but it's like if you have skin in the game, there is a difference, like when you invest in yourself and you're paying for the advice, it's better than free advice.
So I'm going to pick your brain for a second on that because I really, really want to unpack this for a second. I myself have had many coaches and mentors. I've been a part of paid masterminds and different coaching groups, but I've also been a part of, I won't say some of the free ones, but some of the free ones where you can log on and you have different Facebook groups and things. And I know for a fact, for me personally, when I have invested my own money, and I'm not talking about crazy amounts of money, but I'm talking about money that that you would miss or you could spend other ways, it's had a profound impact on the way in which I go about that. So wanted to unpack for a second to get your opinion for maybe a listener that's listening now that has thought about hiring a coach or a mentor or maybe doing a program such as yours or someone else's, but they haven't gone over that threshold of, all right, I'm going to put my credit card or my debit card down. Do you have maybe, or could you maybe just briefly expand on what you just said before about how for you personally, when having skin in the game really takes it to the next level? Because maybe there's somebody listening now that is so close to the goal line that maybe just needs that kick in the pants.
Yeah, it's like just look at like how much is it costing you in terms of time and money trying to figure it out on your own, trying to do it on your own, failing, getting close, failing, knocking yourself back, versus if you just pay. I think it should be a good amount of money, like you said. That's like I'm a little uncomfortable with this amount of money. You got to figure out what that threshold is for you. Maybe it's $500, maybe it's 5,000, maybe it's 50,000, but it's enough that you're like, I can't like just piss this money away. I got to do what this guy's telling me to do. I think that's really key. And then that's how I accelerated my, and we live in this weird age too, where people want to be flossing all the time on Instagram and showing like, hey, I drive this fancy car, I do this, I take these fancy vacations. But it's like, yeah, how much are you netting? How much are you getting at? Like, I'd rather, and I think people should do this. What I did is I was making all that money. And yes, like I said, we were going to clubs and stuff like that. But the times that I wasn't doing that, I was living in a studio apartment, living super frugally. You know what I mean? That was before social media. So I think most people should live below their means, spend all their money, invest all your money. Like Warren Buffett said, your best investment's always going to be you in your education, in getting better, in coaches and mentors, because then you can, you might not be where you're at now, but you can accelerate. And then all of a sudden, you save yourself 5 to 10 years worth of frustration. And then, 5, 10 years down the road, you built this, and maybe it's just not financial. Maybe you have like, self-limiting beliefs or whatever you're getting over. You're mentally, you're emotionally, your confidence is higher. Like you got to think of all the time you waste and what that does to your self-esteem, right? Like if you're just going, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, like you're failing, you can't figure it out. Like you don't build momentum, and then it kind of just chips away at your self-esteem. You get frustrated, you have anxiety all the time. So that investment is you're getting so much out of it.
I couldn't agree more, and I appreciate you touching on that. For our listeners, Jay, that want to either connect with you, find out more about what you do, as well as your programs, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can go to jay.fit, F-I-T, because my name is long and hard to spell and remember. So j.fit will redirect you to my main site. If you can remember it, I'm at Jay Ferruggia on Instagram or Renegade Strength Show on iTunes, Apple, Spotify.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And as I said, I would highly recommend you guys checking out Jay's stuff. Last question I have for you is the same question we have for everybody, is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
I would just say you touched on it a little bit earlier, like kind of the state of the world right now. I don't think there's anyone on any side of the aisle or anything that would say things are great right now. Like, things have been a little screwy the last couple of years. And I think the way we get back to that is not arguing on social media, not, whatever. it's really every day, and even before 2020, every day, if you get up, and back to my quote about not Dr. King, Muhammad Ali, but Dr. King also said, anyone can be great because anyone can serve, right? And so serve doesn't necessarily mean I have to go to a soup kitchen or a third world country. Serve could mean I do my so that when you and I meet for dinner later, I can make you feel interesting and special and listened to and heard because I'm fully present for you. You're not going to see my phone for an hour at dinner, right? Like we're just going to have a good time and make you laugh and give you compliments, ask you questions about stuff you're into. So I think every day if you wake up, people are like, oh, what's my purpose? Well, if your purpose is, I think your purpose is two things. You create, that superstar, rock star version of yourself that makes everyone around them better. You dial in your fitness, your mindset, your health, your business, your relationships. Every day we can get better in those kind of, pillars of life. And then you go out and share that person with the world and just make everyone else's life better. Serve people, just like I said, serve could just be being there for someone, just listening to someone, just being fully present. So I think that's how and that creates a ripple effect, right? Like if you become that person, everyone around you becomes a little better. Like I fully believe how everyone treats you, how everyone responds to you, reacts to you, speaks in your presence, speaks to you is 100% on you. So if you can control that, then everyone kind of, when you're around, they are better people. Maybe they're less negative. Maybe they don't gossip as much. And all of a sudden they start to be like, what a change in Chris, or what a change in Jay. Like, I got to start, you inspire them. At first, people are always kind of hesitant to change or resistant to change. Like if you log on to your home screen, it's different than yesterday. You're like, what happened? Like you're pissed off, right? Your phone changes, you're pissed off. But eventually you get used to it. And then no longer are people saying, oh, why don't you drink at dinner? Why don't you eat dessert? You're like, man, how are you so disciplined? So you create this ripple where everyone gets better around you. And I think that's, we can't all be Dr. King or Mother Teresa. We can't solve all the issues of the world. But if you start locally with yourself, with your family, with your community, I think you can create those ripples. And that's something to wake up and be excited about every day.
I think that's a fantastic way to end today's episode. And I will just challenge everybody to go out and serve somebody today, because I personally think, as I know you do, it's the most selfless thing you can do. So, Jay, I truly, truly appreciate your time, and I hope that we can connect again soon.
Thank you, brother. This is great. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to episode number 371. I really enjoyed chatting with Jay today, and I hope you took some of what he shared to heart. In his parting words, Jay spoke about defining our purpose as well as serving others. As we are approaching the 2022 holiday season, my challenge to our listeners is to think about how we might be able to serve others this season. It could be a gift, a donation, or something as simple as just checking in on someone to see how they're doing. The best part about serving others is the simple fact that it makes you feel good as well. So remember that this holiday season, and remember, we rise by lifting others up.
And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.